Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about Russia. I'm in Russia, right? I'm going to be talking about Russia and about an African people. Are black African people cursed? Of course, no. You are going to hear some more information today about what black African people have been able to do, which will tell you clearly that nowhere near cursed. They are blessed and they have been a blessing to every nationality, including Russia. But even though I live in Russia, I've been living here in Russia, Ukraine, for the past 30 years, 30 something years. But you will never hear these stories. They never tell you. They will never let you know what your forebears have done for their country. But thank God for history and thank God for documents and for research. So thank God that I did this research and I was able to establish these facts for myself, and they cannot deny it anymore. Okay, here we go. So the topic of today, please go share it, is Africans who built Russian Empire. Africans who built Russian Empire. Сюда поставь. Не, ты поставь сюда. Нет, не идет. У меня здесь все нормально. Может быть, что-то там надо в другом месте ставить. Sorry guys, I need to fix my remote control here. Doesn't seem to be going. So we'll see what we can do about it. Idime market. So we're going to be talking about Africa. So Africans who built Russian Empire. Okay. During the time, there were kings ruling over Russia. And thanks to the fact that black people have actually behaved themselves very well and have recommended themselves so well in the service of the Russian Empire, especially military service, and because of their courage, there was a special place that was allocated and allotted to black people in that they should take care of Russian courts. So the security of the courts were normally under the protectorate of black people, of black officers. And even to the extent that some of these black generals and officers were drafted to be in the service of the king himself. And the black people were some of the assistants, some of the chamberlain, or some of the people in charge of keeping the palace and assisting the king. So let me start by telling you about that one before I really go deep into this topic. So a position of a Blackamoor, темнокожий. So, but this in Russian language is called темнокожий. So it's a position which means dark skin, black man. That's what they call black man up to today. So it's a Blackamoor of the highest court existed in Russia Empire, in Russia Empire, in their highest law, in the highest court, sorry. So there was a position for black people, for black officers in the highest court of Russia. According to that dictionary, Blackamoor means a man from a black tribe, black-skinned man from hot countries, and also a position at court. Okay? For the first time, Blackamoor servant appeared in Russia at the court of the mother of King Mikhail Fedorovich. Yeah, that is one of the kings. That is the king there in Russia. So these black people started appearing in Russia in the court at the beginning, during the reign of this man, which is 1596 to 1645. So, in the first quarter of the 18th century, a Blackamoor position was fixed as part of court staff. In times of Catherine the Great, Yekaterina Velika, there were 10 Blackamoors in Tsar's service. At the beginning of the 19th century, their number rose to 20. In documents from the mid-19th and early 20th century, black servants were called Arabs of the highest court, because it was later on, I think what happened was, there were not too many black people anymore, so they were taking people who are in the Caucasus, and they were calling them Arabs because they were Muslims, some of them. In times of Nikolai I, the number of Blackamoor decreased to 8. Nikolai Perry, see the way they looked. See, Dorman to the Tsar. They dressed like this and they looked like this. See, this is an African man, like me. This is a Russian. Blackamoors were part of a moving team of servants and always followed the court. In the palace, they took shifts at the doors of interior halls. They were considered not only part of the court, but a rather privileged group. At the beginning of the 20th century, a senior Blackamoor's annual salary was 800 rubles, and a junior Blackamoor's was 600 rubles. In 1857, Alexander II approved the uniform to court servants, which remained almost unchanged until the early 20th century when the revolution happened. Blackamoor's court dress consisted of 16 elements, and at the beginning of the 20th century, it cost 500 rubles. Wow. For comparison, an ordinary men's suit in St. Petersburg cost 6 rubles. And the suit of this, the dress of these people are costing 500 rubles. And their salary was 800 rubles. Whereas the suit that time used to cost 6 rubles. And dress coat of Shemba Fure and Shemba Cossack cost 408 and 418 rubles respectively. So Cossack, the Kazaki, they were also there in the team. So there were 2 groups, Africans and Cossack. You see? This was from Russia, the painting from Russia. Painting of Emperor's Palace. This is from the Emperor's Palace of Alexander Perry, with an Arab serving there. They call them Arab, but they're black people. They're not Arabs. They have the African and they have the Cossack there. At the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, one of the Arabs or blacks of the highest court was a native of the Green Cape Island, West Africa. So if you are from West Africa, you cannot be an Arab. His name was Georgi Maria, the founder of the family who still lives in St. Petersburg till today. The family is still living in St. Petersburg. Who are these people? Family. Georgi Maria died in 1912, leaving 5 children behind: Victor, Sergei, Nikolai, Georgi, and Yekaterina. After the revolution, his sons worked in factories, and in 1941 they were drafted to the ranks of the Red Army. One of them died in the war, that is Nikolai Georgievich Maria, died in 1943 at the Sinyavinsky swamps. Another son, Georgy Georgievich Maria, went through the entire war. Now I'm going to the real Russians, I mean the real blacks that participated in building the great Russian Empire. The second hero we are going to talk about right now was brought to Peter the Great as a gift. Peter the Great is one of the greatest rulers of Russia. So this African man was like a baby brought to Peter the Great as a gift. You bring a human being as a gift to the king. His name is Ibrahim Hannibal, or in Russia, Hannibal. He's an African general of the Russian army. General in the Russian army. Ibrahim Hannibal. He was a general in chief of the Russian army, chief military engineer, favorite of Peter the Great, and grandfather of Alexander Pushkin. He was an adopted son of Peter the Great, his favorite. So he was born in 1799 in Africa, around Eritrea or Ethiopia or Cameroon, and was a son of a black African prince and vassal of the Turkish Sultan. When he was 7, Ibrahim was abducted along with his brother and brought to Constantinople, from where in 1705 Serb Sava Raguzinski, who was in Russian diplomatic service, brought the brothers as a gift to Peter the Great. In the Venus Church of Paraskeva, the boys accepted Orthodoxy. Their godfathers were Tsar Peter the Great himself, who gave him his patronymic and surname Petrovich. That is, he gave him his name like a father, adopted him as his father, godfather. And Queen Christian Aberadine of Poland, the wife of King August II. Ibrahim got a Russified name, Abram, and his brother got a name, Alexei. Abram Petrovich was always beside the Tsar, sleeping in his room, in the room of Peter First, Peter Perry, we call it, the same room, accompanying him during his walks. Peter the Great trusted him with various errands, including secret assignments. He became an orderly and secretary to the Tsar. Then he went abroad with His Majesty and stayed in France, studying arts, science, and military science. At that time, Abraham received a salary of 100 rubles per year. He was fluent in several languages and quite good at mathematics and geometry. You see, they have, during the Spanish War, he rose to the rank of captain. In Paris, he became friends with such personalities of the Age of Enlightenment as Denis Diderot, okay, Montesquieu, and Voltaire. These are the greatest Enlightenment heroes of France at that time. Voltaire called him the dark star of the Age of Enlightenment. And these were the people who created the Enlightenment in Europe. Diderot, Montesquieu, and Voltaire. They were the stars of the Enlightenment and Renaissance. Then he went abroad with His Majesty and stayed in France, studying arts, science, and military science. At that time, Abraham received a salary of 100 rubles. Okay, I said that. On his return to Russia after completing his studies in France, Peter the Great met him miles from Moscow. He went to meet him at the gate. He was assigned to the Preobrazhensky Regiment as engineer lieutenant of a bomber company whose captain was the Tsar himself. So his only boss was the Tsar Peter Pero, and he was the director. He took the name Hannibal in honor of African warrior that we spoke about. You remember we spoke about Hannibal Barca, okay, that went to conquer Europe. So he took his name. So he changed his name to Hannibal. He took his last name from Maria to Hannibal. The Carthaginian warlord also in an official letter he sent to Empress Elizabeth in 1742, he requested the right to use a family crest decorated with an African elephant and letters FVMMO. In Kotoko language spoken in Nigeria, Cameroon, and Chad, this means homeland. His grandson was Alexander Pushkin. In his work, Blackamoor of Peter the Great, the Blackamoor of Peter the Great has repeatedly called him a Negro, African, and black. Yeah. So there's no doubt that it's an African. So a few years after Peter the Great's death, Hannibal was appointed a major in Tobolsk garrison, and later became a captain of Engineer Corps. This time he was seconded to Petrov to teach mathematics, by Pernov to teach mathematics and drafting to conductors, and later became a commander of Pernov fortified area. Note that it was not shameful for Russian Tsar to have an African teach science. He was teaching the Russian science. It's a great example that if a person surpasses us in something, it's perfectly normal to learn from them. And yet, skin color does not play any role whatsoever. Great Russian rulers understood this. Later, he was appointed a commandant of Revel by Empress Elizabeth and awarded with a number of estates. Also, he was listed as a gentleman in waiting, a high court rank. This is where it started. That tradition of putting black people in high court was started through him. So it was after that they put people, numbers of people, like 10, 20, to be there all the time. So it became a tradition, a permanent place for black people to be in charge of the security in the highest court of Russia after the Hannibal Abraham. The same year, Elizabeth granted him palace lands with hundreds of servants in Voronezhsky district of Pskov province. Voronezhsky district, Pskov province, where Hannibal founded a manor or a town that is now called Petrovskoy. He's the one who started the town Petrovskoy in Russia, in the Pskov, Voronezhsky Oblast. His attitude towards servants or serfs, they call them. Serfs were, what they call them, kripasnik. They call them kripasnik. These were people who were like servants. Serfs was unusual, but they gave him, the king gave him serfs to go with him to found that region. And all these servants, hundreds of them, were Russians, and he's the only black man, or all the people who were serving him. His attitude towards serfs were unusual for that time, thus renting a part of Ragola village to German Joachim von Thieren. So he gave the Germans, brought Germans from Germany and gave them a whole territory of Russian Empire through the influence of, through the permission of Peter I. Everybody knows that in Russia, everybody knows that Peter I brought Germans to come and help develop Russia. But nobody tells you that Hannibal, a black man, helped to bring those people and settle them in cities in Russia here. He included paragraphs prohibiting corporal punishment of serfs and increasing established standards of statutory labor into their tenancy agreement. When von Thierry violated these paragraphs, Hannibal terminated the agreement. In this, we see nobility of this African. Despite his status, he did not differentiate himself from ordinary people, but treated them with compassion. He was even appointed to handle land demarcation cases with Sweden, because there was a war with Sweden. And when the war was stopped, they needed to agree on the territory, on the land. So he was representing Russia to negotiate with Sweden the territory that way. Then he was transferred to Engineers Corps and became a managing engineer of the whole Russia. He was the chief engineer for the whole of Russia. Directed construction of fortifications of the Tobol-Ishim line, and up to today, it is the time, during his time, under Sad the First, the Great, Tsar the First. Under him, Tsar the First is regarded in Russia as the one who has built the most Russia. He built the modern Russia. The greatest building and construction happened during the time of Peter Perry, so yes, Tsar Peter First. And who was in charge of those buildings? It was Hannibal. So all the Russia, the new Russia that we know today, the civilized Russia that was built by Peter First, was headed by the chief engineer, who was Hannibal. So he's the one who built the new Russia. So he also constructed the fortifications of the Tobol-Ishim line, because there was war all the time, especially with Sweden. It was that fortification that saved Russia from invasion and gave them victory, as well as the Kronstadt, Riga, Petersburg, and other lines. He also directed construction and maintenance of the Kronstadt Canal. At the same time, he established a hospital for workers of the canal and later opened a school in Kronstadt for children of workers and craftsmen. This in Pre-Baltics, in Latvia and other, St. Petersburg and Estonia. This is the man here. He had all kinds of medals from the Russian Tsar. He was decorated with orders of St. Anna and St. Alexander Nevsky. We see distinctive values of this African that demonstrate his high morals. It is said that the great General Alexander Suvorov owed his military career to Hannibal. Now, Alexander Suvorov in this country, in all this of the Suvorov is the greatest general. It's like Napoleon here. It's like Alexander the Great in Russia here. He's their most brilliant general. But nobody will tell you that it is Hannibal, the black man, that encouraged him to go to pursue military career. Because he was a general, Hannibal was a general, and he was his mentor to Suvorov. Even the father of Suvorov was against Suvorov going to the army. So it was Hannibal that spoke to the father of Suvorov and convinced him that he takes responsibility for him and let him go to the army. And now Suvorov is the greatest name military. In fact, all the military schools in all this kind of part of the world is called Military School of Suvorov. So Hannibal's contribution to the development, that's why I said everybody knows Alexander Pushkin, his grandson, but why they don't talk about him? I mean, he built the military engineering, he built the defense lines, he built the engineering all over the country, he built civilization. He helped Peter, the Great, I mean Peter first, to build the whole northern Russia, and nobody is talking about him. Hannibal's contribution to the development of you hear this? Now in Ukraine and in Russia, potatoes is the number one food. But there was no potatoes before Hannibal. He started the plantation of potatoes, Kotoko, in Russia. Even for that, it should have been remembered. Everybody should be talking about him. But nobody talks about it. Potatoes. All of you like potatoes, right? You eat. Potatoes is the number one food in Ukraine, in Russia, in Belarus. Is the number one food. But nobody knows who started the industry, who cultivated the industry. And the industry was started by this African. The industry was started by this African. So Hannibal's contribution to the development of potato farming in Russia is well known. He started the industry. The first potato bed appeared in Russia in Peter the Great's time, who grew potatoes hoping to use them as a medical plant. Jim was just talking about the plant. He wanted to use it as a medical plant. In the 1760s, Catherine the Great, decided that earth apples, they used to call it earth apples. Huh? Земляные яблоки. They were familiar, in Russia they were more familiar with apples. So when they started seeing the potatoes, they look the same size as apples, so they used to call it earth apple. But they didn't know what to do with it. So, and they didn't know how to cultivate it. So earth apples could be used during years of hunger, and instructed Abraham Hannibal, because he was the only one who was familiar with this plant. He was the only one who was familiar with potatoes and how to use it. So the king, Catherine the Great, gave him the instruction to develop the industry all over Russia, who was familiar with this plant, to start growing potatoes in his manors. And it started in his region first, Zaporozhye area, and then it became successful, and they started taking the technology to all over Russia, to in his district. So Hannibal's manor or district became the first place in Russia where potato fields appeared. First small and then quite extensive. They soon spread to neighboring estates. Peasants initially were very cautious about earth apples. Now all kind of all kind of potato. In fact, right now there are over 1,000 food in Russia here that comes from potatoes. 1,000 food dishes, different kind of recipes. Over 1,000 that comes from just this alone. So Hannibal is still feeding Russia and former Soviet Union today. In some years, potatoes saved people from starvation, from hunger in Russia. Potatoes saved them. And gradually, their lack of trust was lost. They started taking it, believing in it, because they didn't want it before. So now, when we eat fried potatoes, potato pancakes, vareniki, with potatoes and so on, we know we can thank the African man, Hannibal, for this opportunity. Anybody who likes potatoes should be grateful to an African for it. But now let's go to his son. So that was Abraham Hannibal, Abraham Petrovich Hannibal. Now let's go to Hannibal's son, Piotr Avramovich Hannibal. Hannibal's son, Peter, became Major General of Artillery. Became a general too. We will talk more about his other son, Ivan, later, but we will talk about his other son. He has two sons, Peter and Ivan. So let's talk more about. So Peter became great as well. Peter Petrovich became, a general, major general in the artillery of the army. But we'll talk more right now about Ivan Avramovich. So Ivan Hannibal, the Afro-Russian founder of Kherson City, he founded Kherson City. It is the son of Ibrahim Hannibal. So he is Ivan. Then he has a brother, Piotr. Because the father, Abraham, named the son after Piotr I, his grandfather. Yeah. Ibrahim Hannibal's eldest of 11 children, he had 11 children, was Ivan Abramovich, a Russian military commander. He was a general too, commander-in-chief of the Black Sea Fleet, Shorne More. He was the float. He was the one in charge of the fleet there, who stormed the Turkish fortress of Navarino. You see, he's the one who fought who led the war against Turkey, Turkey, and won that fleet, the float for Russia. You see, I've heard about him, Hannibal, about him in the army. And when they were talking about Crimea and Black Sea, they were talking about Hannibal, General Hannibal. But they only say, Ivan Abramovich Hannibal. But they don't say he's a black man. I've heard about him, but I never knew he was a black person. Who stormed the Turkish fortress Avarino, helping Greeks in their fight for independence. He served in naval artillery, participated in many sea battles, demonstrating courage and ingenuity. He became a major general and was decorated with the Order of St. Anna. He was later appointed General Master of Ceremonies of Naval Artillery and was a member of the Admiralty Board, the highest authority of the Russian naval affairs. Admiral, the board, Soviet Admiral. This is the board where only the admiral were there and deciding about. He became Lieutenant General and was decorated with the Order of St. Alexander Nevsky, just like his father too, and the Order of St. Vladimir, first degree. He resigned as General-in-Chief under the direction and with participation of Ivan Hannibal. The city of Kherson was founded in 1778. That was the year when Kherson was. Kherson right now is in Ukraine. It's in Ukraine, and it was founded by this Ivan Hannibal. 1778. It's one of the major cities in Ukraine here. In fact, it's the head of a region in Ukraine. In fact, that is the name of the region. Khersonske Oblast. This is it. This is the city that was founded by a black man, Ivan Hannibal. Hannibal. Now, one of Kherson squares is named after him. There is the square. It's called, Prospect Hannibal in Kherson. But people don't know he's a black man. That's why they look down at black people. Even in that same street, in that same town, you should go there and ask them, do you know who is the owner of this? Yeah, the founder of the city. Do you know it's a black man? No, black man can never. No. This your city was founded by a black man. The empress presented him with a jewelry box for tobacco with a portrait on it and the estate on the territory of present-day village of Belazerka in Khersonske Oblast. That was where his Imenia was. His palace, that's where he was living as a governor of the Khersonske Oblast. Is it not amazing that a man of African descent, Belazerka, is still there to today, Belazerka. It's no more. a village, though it's a relative town. Is it not amazing that a man of African descent was responsible for building a regional center of Ukraine? And now, by the way, 300,000 people live there. Now, let's go to their grandson. Let's go to their grandson. Handsome looking, dressed, damp. This one everybody knows in Russia. Everybody knows this. Not just in Russia, all over former Soviet Union. Everybody knows him. But not everybody knows that he's a black man. Some people might suspect. Maria, did you know? Maria, you know he's a black man? Was a black man? Yeah, you know him? Okay, he's not? Huh? You knew? Huh? You knew? Before no, only now. You see, everybody knows it. Everybody knows his work. Everybody actually repeats they recite his poems. And they worship him. The whole of Russia worship this man. But they don't even mention his black heritage. Alexander Pushkin, the Afro-Russian father of Russian literature. He's actually the father of Russian literature and the modern Russian language. He's a grandson of Abraham Hannibal on his mother's side. He's considered the father of Russian literature. He has a dark face, thick lips, and curly hair. He clearly considered himself a black man and identified himself with African slaves in America. In 1824, in one of his letters, he called Negroes his brothers. In the foreword to the first edition of Yevgeny Onegin, that's what they call it in Russian, Eugene Onegin, Pushkin wrote, the author is of African origin on his mother's side. He himself was writing in, but nobody notices that. Everybody knows Yevgeny Onegin or Eugene Onegin, but nobody notices this, that in volume 4, page 455, he talks about himself. Alexander Pushkin, the author of this work, as an African from my mother's side. He himself was talking about himself like that. He wrote it in Yevgeny Onegin. This is the most popular book in this country. I mean, this country, a classic book. But nobody notices that part. Only the very, very careful people that notice it. In philology, Pushkin is regarded as the creator of modern Russian language and literary language. And the brief Encyclopedia of Literature knows high standard of his work, similar to the work of Dante in Italy or Goethe in Germany. Historian Alison Blakely called him a counterpart of Shakespeare. He is like the Shakespeare of Russia. Writer Maxim Gorky compared the place Pushkin holds in Russian literature to Leonardo's place in European art. Leonardo's place in European art. This is the objective picture of him right here. Tsar Nikolai I, or Nikolai I, who was afraid of Pushkin's influence, called him the most intelligent man in Russia. And he's a black man. We see that he has become the best representative of Russia from an intellectual and cultural point of view. Till today, he has not been surpassed. In his lifetime, he was called a genius, including in writing, in print. From the second half of the 1820s, he was considered the first Russian poet, not only among his contemporaries, but also among Russian poets of all times. Further, we will present authoritative assessment of him as an individual and of his results. Maxim Gorky called Pushkin the world's greatest artist. He was a great artist himself, but he called Pushkin, the world's greatest artist, the greatest Russian poet, a giant, a person of marvelous talent, and he died at the age of 30 something or 40 something. You know, a person of marvelous talent, unmatched with anyone else. The beginning of all, the greatest pride of Russia, and the most complete expression of Russia's spiritual power. Only they don't connect that to black race and black people. That is it. Those are strong words right here. He also considered him one of the creators of Russian language and a pioneer of poetry who had put unshakable grounds for everything that would follow him in the field of Russian art. Without Pushkin, there would be no Gogol. That's another giant writer in Russia here. And even that man who is speaking here also the same. So there will be no Gogol, to whom he gave the topic of the Inspector General. There will be no Lev Tolstoy without Pushkin. Lev Tolstoy, I mean, I'm sure most of you know Leo Tolstoy and Lev Tolstoy, Peace and War and Peace. Then there will be no Turgenev, there will be no Dostoevsky. These are the greatest names in Russian literature. All these, I mean, world literature actually, all these great Russian people recognize Pushkin as their spiritual father. Freaking, imagine that. Here we see the undeniable fact. Russians are proud of a man of African descent. Fyodor Dostoevsky, who himself was a giant of giants, claimed that had there been no Pushkin, there would have been no talents that followed him, like himself, like others. There would be none. He paved the way for all of them. Commenting on his poem Onegin, he said, Pushkin appeared to be a great people's writer like no one ever before, and spoke of universality and pan-humanism of his genius. Please note this powerful word, people's. He was people's, he opted today, he's still people's poet, people's writer. This title will further be confirmed by others. It means that people can regard those of different race as part of their commonwealth. In this case, not just as his part, but as the highest expression of his spiritual component. This was well noted by another great Russian writer, Nikolai Gogol. So what did he say about Pushkin? Who wrote that Pushkin was an extraordinary phenomenon and perhaps the only appearance of Russian spirit, a Russian man of such development that might only appear 200 years later. And up to now, there's not been anybody compared to him, to Pushkin, this black man. But everybody knows this. Nobody denies it. No one single person in Russia denies this. But they don't tell you he's a black man, even though he himself called himself a black man. Critic and philosopher, Occidentalist Belinsky, Belinsky is actually the greatest philosopher in Russia, called Pushkin the first artist and poet of Russia. Naturally, it is impossible to tear art out of African blood because they are its creators, as we have seen in the first chapter of this book, How Africans Brought Civilization to Europe. Writer like Ivan Turgenev, another giant of Russian literature, noted that Pushkin had accomplished two tasks that in other countries usually took centuries to accomplish, and he in less than 30 years, less than 30 something years of life, formed a language. He created the language of the modern Russian and created its literature. And those two things could take centuries to be created. But one man did it in less than 40 years. In less than actually 20 years or 10 years. Literary critic Nikolai Dobralubov, that's another great one, believed that Pushkin was of great importance for the Russian Enlightenment. As such, he was the first one to begin teaching Russian audience to read and made Russian populace, the ordinary people, he taught them to read and made Russian language famous. This personality played a decisive role in formation of civilization in Russia. So how African brought civilization to Europe. Writer and critic Anatoly Lunacharsky, wow, that was another great mind, said that Pushkin was Russian spring. Russian, Osin, huh? Vesna. The spring, Vesna. Yeah, Pushkin was Russian spring, Russian morning. Russian morning and Russian Adam. Morning is the beginning of everything. Spring is the beginning of life. Adam is the beginning of life. So Pushkin is everything to them. You see, and everybody recognizes that. They study him in school. Everybody has to study him. And philosopher Nikolai Chernyshevsky claimed that even then, he made way for future development of Russian literature. So everybody recognizes him. But I'm surprised why I did not recognize the grandfather and the father. They are good too. They are great too. Russian philologist Dmitry Likhachov. Likhachov. Yes, Dmitry Likhachov. That is one of their greatest language master. Called Pushkin our greatest national treasure. Writer Taffy called him a miracle of Russia. Poet and critic Innokenty Anensky wrote, everything we had before Pushkin grew and lingered toward him, leading towards him. It was like Jesus Christ, like law led to Jesus Christ. Towards his yet unseen but already promised son. Strong. Poet Konstantin Balmont also compared him to the sun in the following way. Pushkin was indeed the son of Russian poetry, extending his rays to a great distance and bringing to life an endless number of large and small satellites. Wow. Writer Alexander Gertsen, that's Russian language, Alexander Gertsen, called Pushkin Russian to the marrow of his bone because he expressed the culture of Russia like no other person. The most inclusive characteristic was offered by poet and critic Apollon Grigoriev, who said, and Pushkin is our everything. That Pushkin is an Pushkin is our everything. Wow. Amazing. Yeah, this boast of him is everywhere. There are dozens of monuments to Pushkin in different cities of Russia and the world. Museums dedicated to the poet's life and work are found in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Pushkinogradsky district. So there's a whole region named after him. Pushkinogradsky district, Novgorod, Torshok, Kiev, Chisinau, Moldova, Gurzów, Odessa, Vilnius, Bryansk, Slovakia, and other cities. The former town of Tsarskoye Selo and a number of other towns are named after Pushkin. He was able to achieve all this at 37 years old. When he died at 37. Can you believe it? He's a giant of giants. We will furnish our study of outstanding black personality of the modern age Europe on this great descendant of the African general of the Russian army. Further, we will look at the other side of this period of European development, which shows Europeans from a very negative side. Wow. Amazing. We have a video, right, about him. I think we are going to do the video, but before we do the video, let me quickly say, please go ahead and share the message. Let's share this message. Share. And besides sharing the message, I want you to go and join my mentorship program, sundaydelajablog.com/mentorship. If you want to come for History Makers training, go to sunlightlagerblog.com/HMT, History Makers training. If you want to get my books, you can also get them at sunlightlagerblog.com/books. If you want to come with us to Africa to be able to restore Africa like this, you can also go to sunlightlagerblog.com/Nigeria. So thank you so much. We are going to do the video right now, and I hope you'll be able to learn more about the influence of black people in over ancient Russia. All right, here we go.
Septimius Severus ruled. Black people began to rule the Roman Empire. That's why for 193 AD is the time period. Then, 1453, the fall of Constantinople by the Ottoman Turks. That's when the Europeans began to observe. That's when the Europeans began to come back in power, the Caucasians, because what? They dwelt in an area called the Caucasus Mountains. So remember this. Rome, 193 AD, they come back in power in 1453. So the project is iconoclasm. That means breaker of images. So we're going to read through these books.
You have 10 minutes.
Okay. We're going to go to the book called The Icon, page 126. I had to write this down. It's a lot of pages. And real quick, we're going to relate this back to the Bible. So page 126, right here. I'm going to show the pictures and I'm going to pass it down. So everybody pass around, all right? Right here, you're going to see dark images of Jesus Christ and his mother. The images of the prophets and the apostles, they were always painted dark-skinned people. It was the time of 1453 when they started to paint over them as Caucasian people. But they were always painted as dark people. And that's what I'm going to show you in all these books. So a lot of these images were produced before the Renaissance. Now we're going to go to page 155. Page 155. I'm going to show you. 155. Now, I want you to look at this, and we're going to start from right here. Notice right here, you're going to pass it around. Notice right here, you're going to see a dark image. You're going to see a dark image right here. You're going to see he was painted dark. But notice around him, they painted him what? A lighter image. You see it? Yeah. It's dark right there, and around him, you're going to see a light. So pass it around the class so you see it. Now, the next book, since we got short time, the next book is going to be Art Treasures of Russia. This book right here, you're going to see more images of the prophets, and all of them being painted as dark-skinned men. Because a lot of times in class, in history, we always learn, when we see people like Septimius Severus, Charlemagne, the Anglo-Saxons, we always see them as these were great, famous Caucasian men, when these were really black men that ruled. Rome, the Byzantine Empire, was ruled by black men. So now, go to page 37. Page 37. And on this one, same history and audit. Right here, you see the Archangel Michael in the middle, Jesus Christ. Right next to him is Gabriel. What color are they painted? They're painted very dark. But in many books after 1453, they're painted white. Why? You had famous iconoclasts, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, Donatello, 3 Ninja Turtles. They were hired to paint over these images. When I went to Rome and the Vatican and I saw the Sistine Chapel, he was hired to paint biblical characters, Caucasian men. Why? So that when a lot of people begin to read the history of the Israelites and Jews, they would think that they were Caucasians. That's why. That's history. Now, go to page 78. Page 78. Page 78. So pass it around. Oh, right there. This here is a scene from the Bible called the Transfiguration. And when you see the prophets, you're going to see them as men of color. Notice here his garment is white, but the skin complexion on the prophets, they're all dark-skinned men. Because when you read the scriptures, you always read about the prophets. They always describe themselves as dark-skinned men. And our forefathers, black men, they painted them as that image of being men of color. But what happened? Remember this. 1453, the Renaissance. So now, we're going to go to Spain, a history and art. We're going to go to page 60. I want you guys to look at this. Now, these women are what color? White. What color are their fingertips? black. What happened? They got their fingertips dipped in chocolate? No, they weren't dipped in chocolate. They were hired to paint over the images. Why are their fingertips black, but their skin is white? Because they had iconoclasts. 1453, paint over these images. When I went to the Louvre in Paris, a lot of the biblical images throughout the museum, white. Then there was a back room. And when I went inside that room, I seen a lot of dark-skinned images. I seen icons. And I was like, Dad, they got all these images in the back room, but in the open area when you're walking through, you see all these images, Caucasian men, famous Caucasian men, you would think. But in the back room, smaller area, you see images that, what I'm showing you, dark images, all right? So, where's the book, The Icon? Right when you finish, pass it back up. There's something I want to read. I'm not going to be able to go through every page. Now I'm going to show you Queen Elizabeth.
5 minutes.
No problem. Queen Elizabeth, I'm going to show you something. Page 77. I'm going to show you right here. Right here is Henry VIII. Right there. Okay, good. Thank you. Go to page where it says the icons of Constantinople. Right here is King Henry VIII. King Henry VIII, if you type it on Wikipedia, you're going to see a Caucasian man. That's what you're going to see, a Caucasian man. This is Henry VIII. He's a black man. Famous king, black man, but you see them as Caucasian men. Guess who this is in the middle? Queen Elizabeth I. She's a black woman. This is Queen Elizabeth I. What happened? 1453. Whitewashed all images. That's what happened. They whitewashed history. So pass that around. Pass that around. So now we're going to read, just right here in the beginning, I'm sorry. Right here in the beginning. Almost finished, almost finished. Read this part where it says, it may seem daring, right here. Wait, no, start from iconoclasm.
It says iconoclasm.
Mm-hmm.
Venetian looting in 1204.
Right.
And the sack by the Turks in 1453.
Remember I said the Ottoman Turks sacked the Byzantine Empire, 1453. That's what
Are the main reasons why only very few icons have survived in Constantinople.
Right.
It may seem daring, therefore, to write an entire chapter on the icons of the capital.
Right.
Yet the situation is not quite so hopeless.
The situation of a lot of these icons with dark-skinned people, it's not so hopeless. Why? Because there are still some images that survive. That's why I'm able to show you these dark-skinned images. They didn't whitewash every painting because it was too many. Read on.
It says icons existed not only as panel paintings,
right,
but also as frescoes and wall mosaics.
Right.
Some of which have emerged from layers of whitewash.
They've emerged from what?
Of whitewash.
Layers of whitewash. That's why when I showed you that Christian woman, she had her image around there. She was all painted white, but her fingertips were black. Why? Because a lot of times they didn't finish whitewashing these images. Now that's all I wanted. Real quick, almost finished, bro. Almost finished. Almost finished. This is page 116. Guess who this is? Spartacus. Spartacus. This is found in Tel Aviv, 1954. He's a black man. But why do we always see him as Caucasian men? Whitewashing. That's why. This is Spartacus. You can pass the book. You can pass the book. And one more. Two more points. Go to page 77. This is the Oxford, oldest English university. The Oxford Illustrated History of Medieval Europe. We're going to go to page 77, and we're going to look on the wall. We're almost done, page 77. I think it's page 77. Oh, 177, I'm sorry. 177. Right here. I want you guys to look at this. This is Hosea, Daniel, King David, and Daniel, Hosea, Jonah, and King David. What color are they painted? Brown. Black, right. Brown men. Guess when this was before 1453. This is the remarkable windows at Augsburg Cathedral. So you guys can pass that around. Here you go. Now we're going to read one scripture to show why it happened in history. Okay, thank you. First Maccabees. In the Holy Bible, you have a book called the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha was taken out of the Holy Bible in the 1700s by the Protestant church. The Apocrypha, you could get a King James Version Bible, 1611. You'll see the Apocrypha in it. This Bible has the Apocrypha in it. It cost me a great deal of money, but it has it. It's still in there. So read First Maccabees chapter 1. First Maccabees 1:1. We're going to read about Alexander the Great, and we're going to read about what the Greeks did when they took the records of the Bible.
First Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip,
Alexander, son of Philip,
the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Kittim, and smitten Darius, king of the
because
Persians.
remember, Alexander's forefather was Philip of Macedon. Now jump to verse 9 about what happened. When you're going to see what happened when the Greeks.
And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves, so that they sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth.
What did the Bible just say?
And evils were multiplied in the earth.
Because what the Greeks were doing, it was all against the Holy Scriptures. So go to 1 Maccabees 3:48. We're going to show you what the Greeks did. The Greeks took the records of the Israelites, and then there's something they did. Okay, thank you.
First Maccabees 3:48.
Listen to what the Greeks did. Because iconoclasm, breaking images, that's nothing new. The Greeks took the records of the Israelites and they painted over them as white men. You're going to see it right here.
And laid open the book of the
The
law,
book of the law is the Holy Bible.
wherein the heathen,
The heathen is talking about the Greeks because this is when Alexander, this is the time of Antiochus. But it's from chapter 1, it's talking about Alexander the Great. Chapter 3, it goes in the time of Antiochus. He came out of the line of Seleucus, one of Alexander the Great's 4 generals. Come on.
wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images.
That's what they did. They took the records of the Israelites, and what did they do?
Paint the likeness of their images.
Here it is in this called Our Living Bible. Israelite priests painted black men. These are Jews, black men. But what did the Greeks do? They painted over it. So I'm sorry, that was it. That was it. If you guys have any questions, please ask them now. All right? Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Yes.
Was this only in America that they really did this?
No. They did this throughout all of Europe. They did this
No,
throughout.
but I mean, like,
That question's irrelevant. This didn't happen. He's not talking
no.
about
When I
America.
say
Right.
only in America, I mean, like, are there more pictures that are shown throughout the world that do have darker skin?
Well, that's what he's talking about.
Right. That's exactly what I was showing.
That's it.
Because like this book, Art Treasures of Russia. In this book, Art Treasures of Russia, you see dark skin images all over throughout Russia. Because when you look up the history of the slave trade, they took a lot of slaves from Russia. Why was slaves in Russia? Because black people ruled Russia at one point in time. The reason why.
Would they have pictures of?
Yeah, a lot of these areas they're there. Because the reason why they called it the Dark Ages was because dark people ruled. So they called it the Dark Ages. That's why. But when they came back in power, 1453, they overthrew everything. Any other questions?
Oh, yeah, Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. Are you talking about England?
Exactly. Any other questions? No other questions? I know y'all got questions. What's your question?
You're basically saying all the rulers, and according with that rule, all the prophets, Jesus were all black.
All dark skin.